Guys, it's Kempy here, and here we are with Mr. Professor John Martin.
John Martin.
Is it Dr. John Martin?
Dr. John
Dr.
Martin.
John Martin. John's here today. He's come down to the 2025 Sydney Solar Renewable Energy Expo. And I ran into him at the coffee line. I said, "What are you doing here?"
And again, was such a nice coincidence. I came back to Sydney for the 60th reunion, graduating from Sydney University Medical School.
Yeah, 60 years ago.
60 years ago. And so it's always a delight to come back, see the people I went through medical school with. I've taken a research career in medicine. My wife's a physician, 2 daughters a physician. But within the medical field, there's a distinction between the conventional medical practice, very much regulated by government. You have to do this, you have to do
this.
And the option of what I'll call energy medicine. Now, I became interested in this because some 30 years ago now, I found that there were viruses that were infecting people that the immune system just didn't recognize. The immune system was indifferent to these viruses. There was no inflammation, and yet the viruses weren't just continuing to grow or hurt the person. There were ups and downs. I get sick for some period, not others. It fitted into chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, later autism, and said these viruses are different than most because they are not attacked by the immune system, but the body has energy able to suppress these viruses. So that introduced the idea that there was a non-immunological and like an alternative cellular energy pathway, and if that were stimulated, these viruses would be suppressed.
And that would be the answer why the chronic fatigue syndrome sufferer goes to the doctor, gets 1 million blood tests done, and they can't find anything wrong with them.
That's right. And again, it's been one of the politically sensitive issues because...
Like Lyme disease.
Yeah, but again, I'll say about both of them. You have these complex illnesses, but they're hard to pin down as to specifically. People are tired, they don't think properly, and so pretty vague symptoms. With these viruses, there's no inflammation. So people say there's unlikely to be viruses.
Are these viruses that just you've discovered? Or
yeah, to be honest, and not...
Because we know about EBV sitting latent.
And so people made a big move to say, let's get EBV out of here. Let's get this one out of there. What I came across was another type of herpes virus called cytomegalovirus.
Right.
But then this one turned out to be from the monkeys, which were used to make the polio vaccines.
Right.
And so once I touched on that topic, then the political system said, no, hold off. We don't want criticism of making polio vaccines in monkeys, even though the monkeys were infected with, at first, SV40, but later cytomegalovirus.
Yeah.
And all that information was kind of pushed aside.
And with that SV40, what did we learn that is?
Well, what we learned is that wasn't as bad as, but it was a warning to say, stop using kidneys from monkeys to make polio vaccines.
Right.
Because we didn't know the monkeys had SV40, they did. It wasn't as bad a virus as it could have been, but it also led to a disregard for other viruses, and in particular, the cytomegalovirus. So I've characterized a cytomegalovirus from monkeys, but even that goes beyond regular virology because what it has the capacity, it avoids being identified by the immune system,
right?
But it also regains infectivity by picking up sequences, and so the sequences can come from the infected cell or from bacteria. Although I've not pinned it down specifically to Lyme disease, I'm very confident, having cultured viruses from a lot of people called chronic Lyme disease, that it's not the bacterium of causing Lyme disease, a Borrelia bacterium. It's just little snippets of the DNA of the Borrelia that comes into these viruses. So people get a positive test for Lyme. They make the mistake that it's the whole bacterium, and then they inadvertently treat with antibiotics and so forth. I'm coming back and saying, no, all of these illnesses fit under that category of stealth-adapted virus infection, and that the illness is the same, whether it's chronic fatigue, chronic Lyme disease, babesia, and so forth. The current big interest, and hoping to get definitive recognition of it. I mean, I know it's true, to be honest, but to get the public health system to respond is difficult because of the political overtones. But when the infection occurs before birth, that's where you run the viruses can cause autism.
It can be passed on from birth, from mother to...
Yeah, it can be passed on from mother to that. And autism, I was going to come to a conference, but it was cancelled. The title of my talk for that conference was that autism is primarily caused by stealth-adapted virus infection beginning before birth.
Right.
So that's the theme I have. It contrasts with a move in some quarters to try to say having a current vaccine when you're 15 months or so will cause you autism. I can come back and say, no, it can exacerbate what might have been there beforehand. The people who want to push that.
I personally seen it with my own child. Him get a bit different after the 2-year-old one.
But what I believe is that the elements of the illness are there beforehand.
Yes.
And by focusing on the vaccine as if that were the primary cause, that vaccine is exacerbating what is there beforehand. The reason that that's important, because the people who want to argue that the vaccine that the child is on is causing autism have to confront the fact that when you look carefully, there are all these beginning signs of autism, that something's already there.
Well, they're not built strong because they're babies, I guess, and something like that comes in and strips them down. And same as when people move into a mold-damaged house, they end up peeling the onion back. And
what it is a balancing act. We have the virus on one side, and we have how much energy the body has on the other. If the body has sufficient energy, it can suppress the virus.
Right.
If there's insufficient cellular energy,
that's when all the ones come to the top. And
that's better. And therefore, the message from that, if somebody is infected with the stealth-adapted virus, build up your energy reserves, and your energy reserve will then keep the virus low.
Yes.
Now, this field has taken a big advance over the last year or two. We've identified the fact that in contaminated water, inland waters, rivers and lakes, all the disorder can be reversed if you put activated water into that lake to begin with, and then it restores normal nature's function.
So we're drinking poisonous water?
Well, not so much. The water in 50% of the lakes and rivers in the United States, and probably in this country also, are not as healthy as they should be.
What about the amoeba up your nose, foul area?
And that's a bad pathogen, but generally like algae will grow, or in a lake in many parts of the United States, they have little shell mussels that come in from Ukraine, and they've contaminated, they foul up. What was fascinating is a little bit of intervention, a little bit of energy added to the system allowed nature to regain its reparative process.
Right.
And we see it as, I use the term allostasis, where nature
similar to homeostasis in the body.
Yeah, but it
like for nature.
It can bring itself up. So nature has all these layers through evolution, from very simple, not very energy efficient, and then that's replaced by more efficient. When you block it at the end one that they use, nature requires a little bit of an assistant to reset at the earlier level,
Yeah.
or reset at the earlier level. But that little bit of intervention is dramatic. And with the environment, it's restoring a whole lot of improvements to lakes and rivers at essentially very minimal cost.
Yeah, right.
The same principle then applies
So
to
you could
humans.
just introduce a tiny bit, and then it knows how to naturally fix itself.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's
and
right.
so we sort of talk about the tipping points where nature has a region where, for all of its capacity, it never anticipated and doesn't have the ability to restore itself beyond the tipping point.
Yeah.
But slightest hand up from human can restore nature back to where these allostasis can occur. And that's an absolutely phenomenal concept. Here we are, little old humans, but we're able to return the favor to nature for all that nature provides us.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
We can help you for all you've given us.
So Florida in the US is looking at doing this?
And so what it is, in fact, today and in the next couple of days, if I wasn't here, I'd be there.
Yeah.
The people are meeting with the mayors of major cities, including Orlando, where the lakes are contaminated. They're going to treat areas in the lakes, and then we're going to monitor the improvement. We know that it will occur because it's occurred in lakes in Iowa. The difference is that these studies are being done at a very high level, which will involve like the governor of Florida.
Because Florida is a very Republican state.
Yeah.
Is this something that Democrats oppose, or?
No, it's not. It's more ignorance. In other words, it's like being at this conference here.
Yeah.
You and I can talk about energy medicine, but most of the people attending this conference are not going to relate to that.
They're
most
simply
of the
not.
people in
They don't have the knowledge that we do.
Yeah, right. And I've spoken to people in California, and their reaction is, let's see if somebody else prove it, and then we might get involved, or we don't believe it. We don't think that way. It takes a little effort to think outside the box, but thinking outside the box comes back to what Tesla and other pioneering people
That's how
said.
you make leaps and bounds.
So everything is energy. Put energy in. Life evolved with a source of energy. I actually use a term which I'll mention to you, KELEA, K-E-L-E-A, but kinetic energy limiting electrostatic attraction. And as far as I've presented it to physicists, there's a force that prevents positive and negative charges from destroying each other. They get attracted electrostatically. When they get close to each other, they don't fuse and blow up like matter.
Well, that's just like matter. You put a positive, they won't hit. Two positives won't hit.
Yeah, just that energy. And then that energy radiates out into water. It loosens the water molecules.
Right.
And we can measure that. And that can be converted to chemical
And you only
energy.
have to do this in a little bit of the pond or lake or whatever. Because then it just...
Yeah, you're right on track.
Yeah.
So once the water molecules are a little bit separated, they can then attract this KELEA from the environment and then spread it.
The word cascade. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, absolutely. And once nature gets on, we don't have to know how nature is doing the repair. We just stand back and watch it work. We know.
It sounds marvelous.
Yeah, and then this water one, using a mixture of the volcanic pellets to bring the energy in, biochar, which is just carbon-based material, then good microbes begin to grow in there. Those microbes become able to get rid of the contaminating algae.
Oh, yeah.
And then the whole series of wildlife comes back in steps. And so the particular
So bring back the bees.
Iowa, and eagles come in.
Eagles.
Fishermen are getting better fish this year than they've ever had. And even over the last winter in Northern California, the water in the lake didn't freeze as much as it had in previous years.
Oh, really?
And people went back. And way back in the early 1920s, in that area, that was the message. The lake never froze over completely. And that's because all these viable, good bacteria and other life forms are keeping the water a little bit warm. So it's like returning nature back to where it ought to be.
Back to where it began. So you come in here today to tell people to stop digging up Africa? And
I actually came in because this is a conference on smart energy.
Yeah,
for people.
That's what I said. When I joked, I said they should call it dumb energy.
Yeah, okay. No, it could be. And what I wanted to see was whether I could find somebody who had an interest in this kind of life force energy, things that Tesla's talked about.
I'm all about the Rife machines, Nikola Tesla, the ancient Egyptians. That's let's look at that, you know.
Yeah. And so that's that was my first question, and I feel hugely privileged to meet with you and find a soulmate, as it were, to say, yeah, this is where it's at. These people will learn. The big application that we're working on at the moment, beyond cleaning lakes, people that have these very large data centers have a big issue of cooling the chips down.
Right.
And they don't realize that water can be changed from being relatively hard to absorb heat to making it much easier to absorb heat.
Right.
And so that's an advance beyond improving the lakes.
So you can make it hot really easily.
Or if you can cool down, the chips get very hot.
Oh, yeah.
So you can cool the chips down. And again, I've talked to people, it's that if people don't think in the concept of energy medicine, free energy, what's happening in the environment, they don't sense that they could utilize that.
Right.
They want to utilize what you can bill for as opposed to working with nature. So everything is now focused on the idea of this energy. I still look to talking to Fermi labs or major physics department to pinpoint whether this Cellular is the best description, but the applications are enormous and they apply to industry, agriculture, and health, all three. And it's on a no cost approach.
Yeah.
Because it's just natural. It's an energy. Bring energy into the body, and the body will help itself.
Do what it needs to. Yeah, right. So, yeah, man, you're lucky you come across me because I don't think you would have had anyone else to talk to.
Oh, no.
But
well, I'm happy to be talking to your audience, whoever they may be.
Whoever they may be.
And
there's some smart people, man.
Yeah.
We get called cookers and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I'm all for.
Didn't they put SV40 in they put SV40 in the COVID vaccine?
Well, there's what it is, a little bit of knowledge, and people exaggerate and so forth. What I like to think is the research we're doing as just a hardcore researcher is very reliable, accurate, and so forth, and there's no extrapolation. But it is true that when it finally becomes realized that humans made a mistake, and a big mistake was using monkeys or kidneys from monkeys to grow polio vaccine. That was a mistake. And that led to HIV developing. It led to this other epidemic of these stealth-adapted viruses.
And they made one of the Japanese MMR vaccines from something that caused the meningitis in the early 90s or something.
Yeah,
Gave them
I mean, there have been mistakes. I think it's just, you'd like to think that public health is truly non-commercial, non-political,
just
very
100%
open.
safe was their main driver. But
And when people do make mistakes, you would like to think people would
say sorry,
address it.
And learn from it.
Yeah, and address it. The autism epidemic is huge. It's like in California, 1 in 22 children, 1 in 22 are now being diagnosed as autistic.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and parents, young parents.
When I found that out, I just, you'd never even heard of it when you were a kid.
No, I understand. And so that's the.
I heard of it when I was a kid, and that wasn't that long ago, and we didn't know anyone with it.
Well, young parents having children, that's like 1 in 22 chance.
Yeah,
and
I
if
know.
you bring down to attention deficit, learning disorders, emotional disorders, you know, at least 1 in 10 kids are struggling, big issues. And I'm confident from the research we've done that there's a viral component from these viruses. The fact that some of these viruses originated in the monkeys whose kidneys were used to make polio vaccine is it's an embarrassment to the public health system, but by not addressing it, they're allowing the problem to go. And it's not so much that they're sinister or trying to say, we don't want to hear about this, or that it's just difficult for many people to think outside the box. They have their mindset.
So if you had a kid today, would you give it a vaccine?
Again, I see if the kid.
I don't vaccinate
be
my
very
kid
clear.
anymore.
If the
because
kid, if I felt that the child had a self-adapted virus infection,
But how do you know?
then I would not. Well, you test for it. I mean, they're there. You culture.
You test your mum.
Well, just
You'd go to the psych ward straight away for asking to test it for all these stealth infections that no one's even heard of.
No. It's what it is. Let's be very clear. I mean, I've presented to interagency for autism research and different ways. People just don't grasp the concept easily, and therefore they're not doing it in that sinister way of saying, we know you're right, but we want to deny it. They just don't think easily outside the box.
Yeah.
So
Because we're programmed to trust.
Yeah, well, they're not virologists. So if I remember years ago, the early 90s.
But the virologists were the ones on COVID getting it all wrong every day. So who do you trust?
No, I understand. But certainly with autism, the large numbers of people study autistic children, but they are not virologists. So they don't think in that line. And I remember a story which I can share with you. Way back, 1992, 1993, I met up with a lady from University of California, Los Angeles, and she went by the name B.J. Freeman. She was a very prominent psychologist, and she was the authority in Los Angeles to make the diagnosis of autism. And I explained my research to her, and she said, look, John, autism is our anchor. Nobody questions what we do. You're saying it's a symptom and not a disease. You're saying it's caused by viruses, but not regular viruses, these atypical viruses. You've got to realize that's not our field. We can't
just go
engage with that. We wouldn't be an expert.
Sounds like it's set up so you can't get in.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like the Pope was sick recently, and I'm thinking if you went to the Vatican and you had a chance to talk to the Pope when he's dying in bed, and you say, look, you got it all wrong. Atheism is true.
Exactly. But it needs someone like that to do that.
But he won't pick it up he won't pick it up too quickly. And so in that regard, it's hard to get the message across until somebody else does it. And then
you need more people with you to go and knock on the door.
Yeah, and I've tried very hard with the Centers for Disease Control in the US, or NIH or FDA, to say to people, do these experiments and it will prove to you that autistic children are virally infected. But there's that where the reluctance is, we'd rather not know. We're not guilty, therefore, because we don't know.
Yeah, we can just play the ignorance all day.
We
don't let us not play the ignorance card.
And yet I'm not all that critical. I mean,
oh man, they've been tapping on the door with Lyme for decades now, and they just don't log into it.
Yeah, but again, because I relate to the Lyme community, if I say to prominent Lyme specialists, it's not Lyme, the bacterium, all it is this virus that has the sequences. And I've done cultures, when we were doing cultures, on many hundred chronic Lyme disease patients, a very prominent clinician.
And did you find anything?
Yeah, very, Dr. Boris Karno by name, and very, and he'll accept, he'll say, well, there's Lyme plus viruses, but then he comes back and say, look, John, we've got money for studying Lyme disease as a bacterium. We have political support. We have patients understanding what we're doing.
Yeah.
We can't jettison that and say we're all wrong. It's a virus.
Yeah,
because that we've got to then change. And yet they'll come back and say, we know this patient has Lyme disease, whatever the test shows. If the test is positive, fine. If it's negative, we still will diagnose it as Lyme disease. And I'm saying, but look,
the tests at the moment aren't very conclusive.
Yeah, and rethink it through, but it will come. I mean, all I can say is that I'm very confident that that insight will come.
Yeah.
What makes it very encouraging at the moment is the work on the environment with the cleaning of nature, cleaning up disordered.
So what do you know about like mold toxicity?
Yeah, and the same thing.
Because all these houses people are living in and they're getting sick, and this mold comes along and exposes the stealth diseases that you're talking about.
Yeah. And so what I feel is that there's a illness and people not so much want to make money out of it, but people identify aspects of it. So it's a
chip away at it a bit by coming at different angles.
No, you could have the same patient.
Yeah.
And that patient could go to a Lyme specialist and he will say, you've got Lyme disease.
Right.
Go to a mold specialist and he'll say, you've got mold disease. Go to, you came to me, and I'd say, you've got a viral infection, and then the mold is an added
responsible for this.
It's an added toxin. So you have a virus on one hand and you have your energy level on the other. Anything that reduces your energy, toxic food product,
brings the others up,
will make the virus more active.
Yeah.
And the better way for you to approach that, until we know how to get rid of this virus.
And this is what long COVID is.
Bring the energy. And I think I'm not doing cultures. I mean, I've gone beyond that stage.
No, I mean, this is what happens when people get long COVID.
Yeah, but what I also believe, I've written an article, but if people don't accept these stealth-adapted viruses, they don't know if the people who have long COVID really have the stealth-adapted virus infection and then aggravated by the vaccine or having had COVID, and they then get categorized as long COVID. But if you look at a long COVID patient, it's as an individual with symptoms, it overlaps with the chronic fatigue, it overlaps with chronic Lyme disease, and I think it's better to have all of these illnesses within that broad category, insufficient cellular energy. Right. So you don't have enough energy for your body to work. Yeah. And with that in mind, it's a much healthier way to seek better health than going to a specialist, like a mold specialist, and say, take this drug, or Lyme will take this antibiotic, because over time, those treatments haven't worked, and the situations have just got worse rather than better.
SIRS.
Yeah. So that's a
chronic inflammatory response syndrome.
Yeah, and again,
it's got 55 different names. It's all the same thing.
But I pick up the same thing. Except it's funny because, by definition, what I'm saying is the stealth-adapted viruses do not typically evoke inflammation. So if I do talk to the gentleman who came up with that Chris name, again, what I'm saying, it goes beyond what you're thinking, because there is not chronic inflammatory, because these viruses do not cause inflammation. And we've taken these viruses, injected them into mice, and cats even. They go in, they are throughout the whole body, they cause symptoms in the brain. And the reason for that is the brain is so sensitive that limited localized damage can be disrupted. A little bit of damage in the liver, the kidney, the body can cope with it.
Yeah.
So they cause brain symptoms to cause the patient to become sick, but it's not an inflammatory reaction.
Right.
So when we put the virus into these animals, there's no inflammatory cells, but the virus is damaging the cell in its own way, and so the cell's not functioning well.
Right.
So that's the insight. But I can approach it as a pathologist, basic researcher.
Yeah.
Clinician have to deal with here and now,
Yeah.
and they need to have a label, hopefully that they can, not market so much, but they can bring patients in with that, and then they treat it in their own protocol.
Yeah.
But I've had many discussions with these Lyme literate clinician, mold literate clinician, and they all agree there's no distinguishing feature, and what they see could be labeled by any of their practitioners, but their clinical model is to bring patients in because of that. And there's no question that if you're got low energy
Yeah.
and you inhale a lot of toxic mold material, it's going to drop your energy levels down.
And drop below the threshold that your body's keeping it all together, then boom.
Yeah, that's right. And these
Yeah.
patients go through these ups and downs,
Yeah.
exacerbate, they recover for a while.
Horrible disease. And then some doctors just think it's all made up or something.
No, and
People want to get out of bed at least once every 5 years, you know.
I mean, what I see are the families that are involved, and then you have the situation where the wife will say, "I've got chronic fatigue, I can't do this," but her husband has to work. He's just not allowed
It's
the
a big
luxury.
burden.
And then, because it's a virus and because it passes between family members, it's then occurs that the children come down with illnesses. And there were some particular families that I followed where there was one particular family, I mean this one, the father, or the father of this woman, was a banker, very successful businessman. He started to get Alzheimer type disease,
All right.
and the daughter knew that he was going downhill, but his mother could cope. Her mother could cope for a while, but then she got sick.
No,
So then they said, "Come and move in with us." And then she got chronic fatigue, but her husband got amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, another self-viral infection.
Yeah, right.
And then they had 3 children, and then the children developed these learning disorders, slow platelets, each one of them. So within that family, they all knew they had something common. But according to the medical system, he had ALS,
Yeah.
he had
Because the medical
Alzheimer's.
system, it's time that they now start to recognize genes. Like,
Yes,
they know about it, like gene mutations. That,
yeah. But,
you know, but what? They just don't care or never going to look at it? Or
well, I think there's a reluctance.
my
to-
GP doesn't even know what a gene does.
No, honestly. But there is a real reluctance to associate with viruses. And if I go back to that autism example, it's not easy for a mother of an autistic child
No.
to agree that gee, my child might be virally infected because he's already shunned at school. If he goes to school and parents of other kids think that he could be infectious, not to cause autism, but if he infected another child, my child, he came home, I could pick up the infection, my next baby might be at risk. So there are big topics that take courage for public health system to address, because that's where you would like, again, to have a very open public health system with courageous politicians able to just look truth in the face.
Even RFK Jr.'s folding now or something.
Well, no, and again, what's likely in the United States now is politically it's better to embrace everybody.
Yeah.
So I've spoken to RFK Jr., very happy. In fact,
Oh, really?
Years ago, he called, asked me a favor, and I haven't called him back for one.
That's cool.
But having said that, what's likely to occur in the United States is that in a politically way of getting support, they'll open it up to everybody. They'll say, you come and talk to us about the food that the kid is on, the preservatives in the food and so forth. And they'll say to another one, you come and talk to us about the kids spending too much time on the screen time or something. Somebody else come and talk to us about electromagnetic radiation. And if there's anybody left, oh yeah, here Martin, you come and talk to us about viruses. I would, I'm not critical of that, but that's reality. But it would be so much better to sit down beforehand and for me to go through and say, look, this is it. All these kids are virally infected. Get, the NIH or whatever. Just to
do you know any virals that can fix these viruses that aren't really defined?
Well, that's my work, and that's what I work on.
Yeah.
They're really quite fascinating in that we've taken the research to another step, which is that the viruses, which is not normally realized, but you have a very big virus. It has more than 200 components, like a cytomegalovirus.
Right,
Only 3 components are targeted by our cellular immune system.
Right.
So the virus loses those 3. It has some other parts of the originating virus, but then it picks up sequences from other bacteria or from picking up sequences of infected cells and transferring those sequences through. So what is really required is to culture these viruses and go ahead and do the sequencing. So
you've defined them and given them names?
Yeah, I've given them the name.
And how many is there?
That's again a question. Many people are infected. Virtually all children, they're infected. And it's not as if you can get in there and clean the virus out totally.
No.
But you can certainly enhance the energy level in the body so the virus is kept suppressed.
Yeah.
And that's the approach. When it will be recognized, I don't know. I keep on saying, I hope in my lifetime.
Yeah. I hope in my lifetime.
Yeah. But I think it will. I think that.
So are you still working?
Yeah. No,
right.
I spent a lot
because you're
of time.
84 years young and still going.
Yeah, whatever. But no, I'm still writing, and I publish a lot of articles.
And you work at the.
I live in Los Angeles.
You live in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and I came. So, and I'm very comfortable meeting people like yourself who have this insight. I know people.
But what good am I with this insight? I'm just a solar salesman, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I saw your fancy suit and said to myself.
But what I mean is, I'm not in where someone with my knowledge should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
there's not enough people that know what we know to push it up.
Yeah, but it's truly amazing to me. There was a French criminologist. And his name was Bertolin. Bertolin was his name. And he made a statement once that people only see what they observe, but they only observe things that are already in their mind.
Right, so I believe that, man.
Yeah,
because anytime you show someone something, they can't get the correlation together, or I don't know, their brains aren't working.
Yeah. And that's one of who knows, might come from this interview, but it's getting that message to the public that they can look at these things differently, not as the victim, which is kind of psychologically defeating, but look at having got this insight and say, wow, the message I've got to work harder to get my energy levels up. How can I work on it? How can I learn from people like yourself?
So how do you get your energy levels?
Well, you were talking about acupuncture,
semen retention.
But one of the real arguments is that our brain is a receiver of this energy. So if we learn through practice how to make our brain more efficient, we will generate that energy in.
Even like meditation, I only started that a couple of years ago, and that there's something in that. And then you look at what they were doing in ancient Egypt, and that's what we were talking about. We don't know enough about that as humans in 2025, and it doesn't seem that anyone looks at that.
But again, the evidence is out there.
Yeah.
If it would, you can't expect commercial people to promote it, but through social media they should. I know one particular mother who had two children. One was, quote, neurotypical, normal. The other was an autistic daughter. She would take them to the park every day. The neurotypical one would play with the other kids on the swings and slippery dips and so forth. The one who was autistic would go to a tree that she related to and just stand in that tree. And the mum could just see the fact that that child would develop a calmness and support from that environment.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in people learning how to energize their body the best way they can. And it's been out there for so long. You don't want to be stressed.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, people say, you don't want to dwell on the past and dread the future. You want to accept what's happening and try to have that like a battery, like in this conference here. You don't want to be short-circuiting the energy in the battery. You want the battery to be as fully charged as you can. And then we all have genes that are not perfect, and some people have viruses that shouldn't be there. But the best answer is to enable the body to use its resources by having enough energy in the body. And again, to go back to really nice development over the last year, putting that principle to work in the environment establishes it, because skeptical medical people will say, well, this lake cleaned up so quickly, or the people in seeing the lake clear up will say, well, if it worked on the lake, it probably will work on me. Yeah. So that's the...
Apply that same principle to the body or something.
Yeah, and so that concept. And then in industry, the same way. That if you want to use water for cooling, make the water activated, and it will cool more efficiently. So there's been there, Tesla as an example. We talk about free energy, it's available. They're trying to commercialize.
Convert water to energy?
Well, to use...
I think someone did that once and they got nuked.
Yeah, well, certainly people have paid a price, but the concept is it outperforms, and we're not subject to all the advertising we're thrust upon us. We can kind of think for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that's been definitely thought-provoking, and it's a lot of stuff.
Let me tell people how they might make contact. You don't have to, but I run a non-profit in Los Angeles, and I call it CCID, Center for Complex Infectious Diseases, and though I go by John Martin, I do have the initial for my father, W. So there's an email address, W. John, John, Martin, Martin, at ccid.org, and very happy to have this kind of interview available for people in the United States, or to receive inquiries from Australia. It's a real thrill to revisit Sydney, meet up with my sister who lives here, and what a great choice I made this morning when I said, let me go down to this new convention center they have in Sydney and see who I might meet, and to meet up and have the opportunity for an interview. Is
two open-minded individuals. Sounds good.
We can change the world.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you, John.